G'day, everyone. It is Seamus, your Whisky Club buyer, ambassador, head of Whisky. I am so chuffed to be joined by two absolute legends who maybe are watching along on a device because I'm getting echo. If you guys are getting echo, just let us know in the comments and we'll sort it out straight away. But Tim, Rob from Waubs, how are you guys? It's a pleasure to see you.
Yes, good to see you guys. Excited to be here tonight.
Mate, it's a pleasure to have you guys here, and honestly, it's one of those we've been working so hard to get a release with you guys for so long, and it feels like a bit of a end of an era, but start of another one. I mean, it's almost time to start thinking about the second release. Now, we're here talking about a pretty special whiskey. I hold in my hand bottle number 1, which I'm being very careful with because if I damage it, someone in the high powers will probably get very mad at me. But it's a very special release. It's the Rusted Casks. There's 1,000 members around Australia looking at a bottle of this, absolutely chewing over it right now. And maybe a bunch of them having their first Waubs. I mean, Tim, Rob, this has been an incredible journey for you guys. Can you tell us a little bit about the distillery?
Yeah. Thanks, Seamus. I'll take the lead. I'm Tim and Rob here, who's my brother and head distiller from Waubs Harbour. We've been going for about 6 years or so, and it's only been about a year and a half or so since we've actually had whiskey out on the market. So a lot of people probably wouldn't know us, and it might have been their first experience with this whiskey in their hand, which is pretty exciting for us to tell, new stories about what we're up to down here on the east coast of Tasmania. Prior to getting into this distillery, Waubs Harbour, Rob was into distilling, and prior to that, he was into science, and so we had a good sort of distilling background in Tasmanian whiskey, having been with Overeem and Lark before. But when we started Waubs Harbour, it was all about creating a truly maritime Tasmanian single malt whiskey. And by maritime, we had a vision to create. I mean, some of our favourite whiskies were from these beautiful Scottish areas that are surrounded by coastline, and it just so happens that Tasmania is, heavily surrounded by wild ocean as well. So when we set out day one, it was to go and get ourselves a site that was really exposed to that, truly Tasmanian maritime environment to get that provenance into our whiskey. And here we are today, 6 years later, after having, purchased this beautiful old oyster hatchery that sits literally on the edge of the ocean here in Tassie. And then a few years later, we were able to get the abalone farm next door to us. Both old aquaculture businesses that had shut down and had just had these perfectly positioned buildings, sort of surrounded by rust and surrounded by salinity and very stable oceanside temperatures. Perfect for what we wanted to do. And today we're drinking the benefits.
Well, mate, and it tastes like the benefits. I mean, the location is incredible. I was with a guy from the Scottish side of the industry today, trying to articulate how different Waubs is to any other Tasmanian distillery, and it really is that coastal element. I mean, the only distillery I've ever seen close to the sea is Cowlila on the Isle of Isla, and I think even then Waubs is probably closer. But it's not just where the distillery is, it's also it's a heck of a distillery. Can you tell us a little bit about what went into getting that thing together? Because it is just an incredible place to visit.
Rob was very intentional with how we wanted to set this up. Very intentional about wanting to brew ourselves. Very intentional about the type of equipment, having been experienced using different equipment out there in the few different Tasmanian distilleries. We were very, we had to retrofit an existing building, an old oyster hatchery. When we got it on day one, it was fully set up still with tanks and plumbing everywhere to make little baby oysters. So we spent the first month just stripping it out, and then we had to be very purposeful in how we, adapted and renovated this building to suit our equipment. But it's worked out perfect because one of the nice things about these old buildings is that they're mostly old brick, and so it creates and mostly these old sloping concrete floors with existing drainage and that sort of thing. So it actually was halfway perfect. And then even there's that part that we some people might know about. We often talk about in it. It's the cooling system that we're able to create here at Waubs Harbour. Something pretty cool is we're actually able to retrofit the old oyster hatchery saltwater intake. So that obviously, be pumping up salt water and had all these licenses to do so, and a pump house right on the water, pumping up thousands of liters an hour of this this beautiful cold salt water, and they'd be pumping it through their tanks, obviously, to keep their oysters alive. But we're able to convert that and use the energy from the cold water, convert it into fresh water, essentially, and run fresh water through our equipment so that it doesn't corrode our equipment. But effectively, we're using the energy from the ocean to cool our stills, our condensers, even the jacketed fermenters that we have. So it's a beautiful green energy and sort of sustainable solution. But that was just one little example of what we've been able to do here with an old oyster hatchery.
Well, I mean, it's incredible, and it's incredible, I guess, to take what does feel like a lot of Tasmanian whiskey experience as well and make sure it is doing this completely innovative side of our industry. And is at this point, I will remind the members, I mean, you can pepper the guys with as many questions as you have, and they will do their darndest to answer them. It's always one of the best things is having access to the likes of yourselves and really connecting those dots. And I guess I'll throw a question to you, Rob. You're coming to us really as one of the most experienced guys in the Tasmanian industry, which is almost so insane to articulate. But what's it been like for you evolving over the years between Lark and Overeem and now Waubs?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing, that a challenge like a new distillery like Waubs and how that all works, and you really need to lay the foundations beforehand to figure out what you want to do in production. You can't just go and start a distillery without that in the background. And some of the core learnings or foundations were definitely when I was working with Casey Overeem. These were back in the days when Overeem was underneath his house, and we had that one-on-one real creative space to really develop a love for whiskey and sort of work in the science angle. So my background before whiskey as well was in Antarctic marine science. I did a master's, and so I always looked through this slightly different lens at whiskey making. So Casey would be looking at a lot of tradition. I'd love all the philosophy and the tradition behind Overeem and the foundations there. And then using that scientific lens to sort of understand, we sort of both grew quite well together in our knowledge of whiskey. And then through going into Lark, I was able to go into the head of production there. And so I had a lot of operational experience, and just coming out the back of as well, some growth at Lark. We did a few upgrades where we, I can't quite remember the exact scale, but we reinstalled an extra set of stills in, commissioned another gin still. Like, we're going through some significant growth. So we've just been in communication with all the right people to go ahead and start a new distillery. And when I was talking to Tim, how does that work? We looked at this site at the beginning, there's a few hurdles here, like things like power and access, and things just one after another, the hurdles kind of fell down. And that was really good from a production point of view, because it married in with what we're trying to achieve with our actual vision for our maritime brand. Because you can't usually just slot something into a retrofit building. Like a green site's far easier to do, but this site, you get the character and you get the real atmosphere of what it is to be a coastal distillery. And it excites me because of that coastal influence on the product. And so you start tailoring all your gear to fit that as well. And then you tailor your recipe as well. So you really lean into it. And that's sort of how you use your past history to recreate something new now.
Absolutely. Was it a case, I guess, what came first? Was it a case of the wanting to do a coastal distillery came first, or the Bicheno site came first, or was it just a love of wanting to do something new in the industry and all kind of came along the journey?
For us, there's definitely, we've seen a fair few different distilleries in Tasmania pop up, and they're all great, fantastic Tasmanian distilleries producing really nice things. But for us, what was really representative of Tasmania, especially for us growing up here, this coastal life what people perceive Tasmania and the island state looking and feeling like, and trying to just use that and talk to our core story of how we grew up and morph it into the whiskey as well, like to make it seamless. So we can talk with proper authenticity when we say we do go out and get abs and we do go out and get craze of a morning before we come to work. Like it's a part of the lifestyle of the business. That's the best part.
Oh, look, all our members saw those crays. If anyone hasn't seen, the guys will pop it in the thread for here at some point, but there's an incredible image of the crays hanging out under these casks. We'll talk about that whiskey later, but before we do, I want to just dwell a little bit more on your production, because you've got this incredible coastal impact in you. You're telling me that it led a lot of your production philosophies. What is it leading? What are you doing differently on this still site to, say, any other Australian distillery?
Yeah, so like what Tim was saying before about, you know, the core beginning product of raw barley, where you want to brew it on site and having that control. So my microbiology background says you need to be at that level, controlling those things in fermentation. So early on, and as well, sugar extraction. So looking at like the base core ingredient and having really a good control there, and using the equipment on site to be able to manipulate that, not necessarily like forced, working within the temperature ranges of what we're using, what is natural here, but definitely trying to work with the gear and with the environment to create something that is a little bit more briny in notes, especially in some of the fermentation. I get a lot of raw barley, but also like a green apple and a cream that comes through. And then when you're when you distill that, and you can see that coming through, but you're adding your distilling technique to emphasize some of the oiliness and some of the brininess as well, and metallic notes from the still. You can really get your honing your new make spirit. But then once you get to cask maturation, there's a whole nother section to talk about there, which is really interesting. Did you want me to go further on that? I feel like.
I mean, look, we're there, and
I want to go. I'll go there. Yeah, absolutely. Because the casks, it's a great thing, and the barrels are sitting here for anywhere from 3.5 to up to 12 years. Is we want to aim high and get some of those longer age statements in our range, and that's all to come, because we're only 6 years old. But in that time, when those barrels are sitting in this environment and in these conditions, things happen. And you can see where you have the old oyster hatchery has like salt encrusted walls, and you can't get it out. It's like what happens here on the coast on the weekends, and when a northerly breeze comes through, usually it's kind of coming across the Bass Strait and then kind of nips down towards New Zealand. It kind of comes down the coast at the same time, and you get these temperature differences, pressure differences, humidity differences, and pressure and temperature, humidity make a big difference in barrel maturation. And the pressure, you get that suck pull in the barrels, and you get with the humidity, like we do our tight dunnage style stacking, and so you get big humidity changes in between your barrels. And your temperature obviously is actually kind of mild. You'd expect it to be going all over the place being in Bicheno, but because of the ocean, it does all like that natural air conditioning on the bond stores. So it's very flow through. But there's this other thing that has been happening lately that that is curious, which is the salt layering on barrels. And so over time, a crust sort of builds up on the barrel. And it happens today. It was happening. The mirrors on my car were fogged over with like a salt crystal. The underneath your car rusts, like it just happens. Like the tops of the barrels rust, the bottoms of the barrels don't. There's this salt crusting on the top. Yeah. And the bond stores, the floors get wet when when these northerlies come through, especially because the humidity in the air, the salt that's embedded within the concrete, it kind of wicks out the moisture from the air. and it just leaves the floor wet. And it's the same sort of things happening on those barrels.
Yeah.
That same location, except that I was just looking at just before we went down to the Tas Whisky Week. I was decanting some casks and just looking through my notes on ABVs, in particular on decanting, and our ABVs typically go up, not down, which is an interesting thing. And my theory has to do with that salt crusting and the wicking effect it has, like where it could be pulling, or that's the theory, is pulling moisture, not alcohol, from the barrel, increasing the ABV. We still have lower allows, like that's normal. You get Angel Share, but not usually does it go up, and that's my
and I'll just dwell on that for a moment for a bit of Whiskey 101 for the members, because it is a really interesting point. Typically in whiskey maturation, the more humid the environment the whiskey is being matured in, the more likely that you will be losing alcohol and your ABV will be gradually decreasing in the cask. Typically. Now, obviously by the sea, you would be assuming that's a fairly humid environment. That's absolutely incredible. Is that influencing the ABV at which you're going to be filling the casks in the future? Are you planning to potentially start lower and with the knowledge that it'll go up?
I'm not intentionally doing that because I feel it's a specific ABV for extraction reasons. I don't want to go too low. But of course, we have a lot of trials and experiments within the distillery. We're doing things with yeast and peat and various other things as well. But the within that, of course, that's a part of it, especially knowing the history of a barrel. Like we haven't quite touched on that yet, but we have a bunch of different types of barrels here, fortifieds and bourbons and just a whole heap of things. And obviously that some of them are first fill, some are second, third fill. And you need to treat those differently because they have different extractables that will mature with you along with your whiskey. So it's you need to sort of understand what you have as a barrel, and then you can start tailoring spirit and especially fill strengths to match that. There are examples where it's a great idea to go lower.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess that it does really organically bring us to, we'll talk about the typical casks, and then we might jump into this whiskey, because you're typically playing with American oaks, Australian ports or tawnies, and Australian sherries or aperas. Am I right in saying that those are your three kind of predominant cask styles?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for us, especially with the Tasmanian maritime style, we're trying to hit maritime, of course, but the Tasmanian element for us is there's this fortified, especially tawnies, driving those early beautiful Tasmanian whiskies. And there's a bit of, to follow the trend or the heritage there, that has to be incorporated. And it's something that Tim and I like as well. The Sultana finish of a tawny is just delicious. So, it's something that's a part of each of our core lines. But this Rusted Casks is something a little bit different, a little bit special, using those Apera casks.
Well, it certainly is. And you've played with Apera casks a little bit, which I have seen. And at this point, I'm going to stop being selfish because I am peppering you with my own questions. And there are some fantastic ones from the members here that I haven't touched on. So I'll jump back for a moment before we get into the Rusted Casks and ask you one from Ian Peter Allison. Now, he's a terrific member, but I'm guessing a bit of a peat freak, because he's one of two members asking, have we got some peated whiskey on the way? If we do, what would it look like?
Yes, the short answer is we have peated casks down, and there isn't a fixed date or time or way we'll showcase those. Although, in saying that, we have got a new limited release coming out next week, and it's actually got just a little hint of our first coastal peated whiskey in it, and cool. It's only a very small amount. It's kind of used as a blending tool in this case, but and this is a peat that we actually get from just down the road here. So it's different from your classic Highland peat, which is typically, sphagnum moss and that sort of stuff. But this is when you're down on the coastline and we're in a salt marshland. It's very much made up of organic material that's found on the coast. So you're talking about salty sort of succulents and the local melaleuca tree and reeds and that sort of thing. So a different flavor profile altogether. And so that's been really fun and thing we've experimented with. And because it's this salt marsh that comes out into the ocean, but it's a freshwater river that comes out of the ocean. The further you go up the river, the more the organic material is changing because you're getting further away from the coast. So we've done lots of trials and experiments all the way up and down this river on small scale before we've taken it to bigger batches. And so we've got peated stock down. It's typically not it's typically fairly light in style, and Rob's been using it only this once for this new limited release that's coming out next week called Kelp Revival. Sorry, shameless plug there, but yeah, and it was more used as a blending tool to create this nuttiness in it. But yes, stay tuned, Ian. It'll come out one day as a purebred peated release.
I've got to ask, and it's a Tasmanian niche question, but is this post malt peated or is this during the malting process peating?
Yeah, it's post malt.
Yeah, fantastic.
Everyone in Tassie and Australia is we're all ambitiously trying to get to that stage where we can have our own malting floors or peat at malt stage at the malt stage, but no one's really at that stage yet, except for a couple of smaller scale guys like Peter Bignell comes to mind.
Yes, the Ferno guys. There's a couple bouncing around now, but it's no shade at post malt peating because it does give this wonderful kind of nutty. It's like a richer smoke, but a less acrid smoke. It works really differently. So super interested to hear, and super interested with. I mean, you're basically doing a really interesting terroir experiment in playing with the freshwater coastal ends of that spectrum. It's going to be awesome. I only have one more question on your peated whiskies. What kind of casks are they in, or have you chucked it in everything?
Yeah, definitely. Is this trade secret stuff? No, I really like to use second fill casks in particular with anything that I'm using that is malt driven. So like if it's a peated whiskey, if it's a yeast trial and things like that, anything special that I want to showcase that malt in particular, second fills. And second fills that I think work the best are the bourbon and the sherries. Sherries are my favorite on the pairers. And that's the pathway that I choose because that's what I think works. The reason is with the tawnies, for instance, is that the tawnies tend to sit in the same spot on the palate, and so you get a dominance, and so you don't get to get the balance between tawny and peat. It's really difficult to achieve that where one is really shining, you just kind of dominate the other. It doesn't work as well where a pairer plays off the peat. So it's nicer in my opinion. Awesome.
Well, I could pepper you with MPD questions all day, but I'm sure at some point you'll tell us that you've given enough trade secrets. So it might be time to talk about this incredible little bottle here. And Rusted Casks, I think, alludes to what made this whiskey so special. I could tell the story, but the members have heard enough from my mouth. I would love it if you guys could tell the story of how this whiskey came together.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got it right in front of me as well. So, but basically, it was awesome for the Whisky Club to even come to us, or we collaborated in a way that we're trying to work on something that really showcased what Waubs is. One, to a lot of the customers that are trying Waubs for the first time, so it needed to match that expectation and introduction to Waubs, but also amplify up everything that kind of encapsulates Waubs. And working on those core principles of that, we were trying to basically use some Apera casks, which are beautiful and juicy and nice, like tinned fruits, and there's like nectar components to it, but really playing up on the kitchen spices that bourbons bring to the table. And so we did a finish in 200 litre bourbon, a couple of them, and that really brought those kitchen spices to that whiskey. And we just really went to town really and amped it up as well by maturing these on top of the salt tanks. So like we have these crayfish or abalone tanks that are from the ab farm, and we keep crays in them just for fun. But we propped up these barrels right on top to really amplify that salt. And I haven't talked about how the salt component or brininess components work with whiskey, but we're putting a lot of sweet inputs because of the juiciness of the appearers and the malt, as well as a sweetness about it and earthiness as well. But if you use the kitchen spices to really work with that, the salt cuts through some of that sweetness. It allows you to layer up more sweetness. It doesn't taste unbalanced and just overly sweet. It cuts through it and adds depth and character. That's like the beauty of having a salt or matured by the ocean.
Yeah, well, and it creates this immaculate kind of balance. And I mean, this collaboration came from such a fun place. I mean, I remember two things. I remember one, when you were releasing the initial kind of trials that were not your spirit, but were in your maturation environment, and where those whiskies were coming off, and they were absolutely incredible. And then I remember the moment of drinking the original for the first time and really enjoying the balance that you had in your spirit that was almost this salted caramel character. And it wasn't until I visited the distillery that I quite appreciated how legit it all was, and how you were actually introducing that salted character. I mean, I remember this scene of, like, you've got all these casks maturing along a wall for your private casks, and just out of like an open window, there is just waves absolutely hammering the nearby rock, and God, you're getting sea spray on your face. It's no wonder that you do get that kind of coastal salted element to this whiskey. But as you've said, you've balanced it. I'm going to tell the members the stupid thing I asked for that you said no to, which was very, very sensible that you said no. But when we first caught up, I can't even remember at what point, but it was like, how do we bring that moment to life, that Waubs moment in a bottle for someone who's in the middle of the Narrabeen? How can they appreciate this coastal experience? And it was this saltwater influence, this taking the coastal thing to 11. I think I asked originally if we could put it in a cage and age it on the end of your pier. Like getting absolutely battered by the sea. And you gave me the most polite no I've ever heard. I think that's
sounds about right. Yeah.
But the place that we've landed in it with this kind of maturing over the salt water has been absolutely incredible. And I mean, you must have had so many people come into the distillery and ask what's going on with those casks. What have reactions been like as it's been maturing?
Yeah, that's. I mean, everyone's interested to know what if the maritime environment is a tangible flavour in whiskey, for one. Like, but just the people that roll on in and have a look at our bottling line, and then have a look at the some barrels on stands just next to this cray tank, and they kind of peer into it and just see the crays and what's going on here. Like, it's always fascinating. Like, anyone that comes and visits, they love that side of it. We love it too, but for us, it's a bit of every day. But for them, you get the net and you catch it and you go, oh, wait, that one, 3 kilo, and it's a part of it. That's the beauty of it. But yeah, then the questions are like, is that gonna are the hoops going to be okay on that? Are they going to pop? Are they going to rust up? It's like, yeah, well, you're right. There is an element of how long in this environment can the barrels actually last structurally, and that's a question we haven't answered yet. We haven't had a broken barrel yet, but there are some that down there that I'm looking at. The pitting on is intense. I might have to do something about that. But you can change to your galvanized rings or whatever you like. But it's something that we've just been leaning into. And yes, how does it come across in the whiskey? Like I was talking about before, with that salted influence and how you can just use it to cut through sweetness. It's one of the beauties of it. That's one of the best ways, or the best two analogies is salted caramel. That's something that most people have tasted and can understand how that saltiness affects sweetness. But then the other thing is like seasoning on potato chip.
Oh yeah,
Amplifies flavor. So there's a sort of two part to that.
absolutely. I think there's something so interesting, and as you've said, you're tailoring your spirit, you're tailoring your cast to that coastal moment, and then you're tailoring your output to it as well. Is there anything that you haven't touched yet? I mean, you're still 6 years into making whiskey there. Is there anything you haven't touched yet that you're excited to in the future? Anything that's going to change that's on the horizon in casking or in yeast or in any kind of experimentation?
Yeah, absolutely. Like yeast is one part of it, which is, so yeah, my microbiology background is like there's only 3 core ingredients in whiskey, barley, water, yeast, and then you add in your barrel, and everyone's doing work with barrels, and that's beautiful. But, and barley, like we're doing our Tasmanian barley, that's important to us. Peat smoking is sort of in that category, but yeast is one part as well that we haven't touched on, which is something that we've been doing in a lab that we have in the distillery. I basically can culture up any yeast. I can find it foreign or like as in just outside. I can find it in a vineyard. I can import it from another country. So like at the moment, commercially available yeasts are the predominantly most used ones because they're you can dehydrate them, and then when you receive it's for transport reasons. But if you buy liquid yeast, you can get things that other people don't have. You can experiment in those areas and flavor profiles. So I was talking earlier about new make styles being our style for a lot of our lines are apple, cream, and that raw barley, whereas I've got yeast that display more like a Jaffa chocolate orange component. And so when I think about how does that work, I'm thinking Tawny, let's line it up. I can see how that's going to layer up really nicely. So there's all this work and all this this unexplored area that we've just been zoning in on.
All right, this is exciting. I'm looking forward to the vertical of tasting. That's just all the different yeast types and all the different casks. That's going to be a fun day.
Yeah.
I've got a member here who's totally after my own heart, asking a question that I don't think gets asked enough. And I mean, we did a bourbon finish on this whiskey, but Graham Stevens is asking, is there any 100% bourbon cask releases in the works?
Well, short answer is not really. To be perfect, it is something that we love. Although, I mean, our Waubs original is around 90% ex-bourbon, and Rob loves using different casks as blending tools to balance things and create those complexities, which is what he's done with a Tawny cask. Married into that bourbon cask. But yeah, no, we haven't got 100% bourbon cask. We haven't done it. And, never say never, of course. I'd personally love to do it. So we'll watch this space for one day. But no, there's not like a sort of, near future release or anything with that. So, but yeah, you could have just seeded the idea, Graham.
Well, I mean, Graham's got to visit the distillery now and try and talk you guys into letting him try.
Yeah.
I mean, that's got to be the only way.
Yeah. We'll have to get Graham down here, sign a bourbon cask, and put his name on it. That's the idea.
And that's the thing that I should mention to all the members watching along. These guys are open to visitors. Like, if you're ever on the Tassie coast, it's an incredible distillery to check out. I mean, is there any invitation that you'd like to extend to members, guys?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We love having people. We don't have a walk-in style cellar door. We like to make it nicely, intimate for everyone that comes. And so everything, we do have tours and tastings, but everything's sort of done by booking, and you can book last minute. We run 2 tours and 2 tastings generally a day, so there's plenty of opportunity. But yeah, we'd love to have any Whisky Club member pop up, and generally Rob would be in there distilling, and you'll be chatting away. It's a small team and small kind of family business, so it's there's only literally 5 of us all together within the business. So yeah, but it's a big part of what we love is tasting whiskey with people that come and visit us. So please do. But we are kind of in the middle of nowhere. For those that don't know Tassie, we are a couple of hours from Hobart and a couple of hours from Launceston. But it's well worth the trip because it's a great spot in the Tasmanian itinerary.
Get to the East Coast. There's 100 amazing things to do around Tasmania, and these guys are a very important one of them. I've got a question here, and admittedly, it's a question that's totally gone over my head. So if you guys are being stitched up, I apologise for perpetuating it. But I've got a question from Callum Dyson saying, Rob and Tim, any chance of an annual limited release with artwork produced by your talented brother?
That would be
yes.
You'll have to explain that one to us.
Yeah, it'd be cool actually.
Yeah,
Cal, this is another this has turned into a brainstorming session, Seamus, because that's actually a cool idea, Callum. And I know we know Callum has got some of our younger brother Nick's artwork. Actually, he got this piece done custom for him, and it was super cool. But yeah, our younger brother Nick, who's also into science, but he's also does this really cool kind of maritime artwork, and it's called Bobby Seaford. Anyway, he does pretty much watercolor style paintings of local Tasmanian things like tuna and local fish and that sort of thing. So and crayfish and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's a cool idea, Callum. We'll have to get your little signature on the bottom of that artwork as well for the idea.
Goodness me, God, it's an MPD session. We're going to have to do these every few months.
We're going to be busy after this.
Oh, I think we all will be. Look, there's been 100 amazing questions, and before I start to wrap things up, I want to throw to you guys, because this is such an incredible whiskey and you've got such an awesome distillery story to tell. Is there anything we haven't touched on that you want to make sure you leave with the members?
Good question, because I've been following these questions that have popped into the chat there, and there's such good things. I wonder if there's a way we can write back to each of them afterwards, maybe. But
please, absolutely. The comments thread will live forever. So please, with the Waubs account, hop in, and our team will do the same.
Yeah. I love the Tom's comment about he's having a smoked brisket, smoked with barrel shavings that we sent him. We did this. This is one of our PX cask that we released, and along with it, we released these. We said to anyone, if you want some of our barrel shavings, because we have a cooperage here on site, and we're super lucky to have one of the better coopers. I mean, there's not coopers, and quality coopers these days are a dying breed, and it's a dying art in a lot of ways to get that real quality. Knowledgeable cooper, and we've been super lucky to have Laurie Schmeider here, who is set up in the building, and he comes from a long line of heritage when it comes to coopering. Anyway, the shavings that he's when he does his shave, toast and char of many of our barrels, we have this big pile of these shavings, and they've got soaked in beautiful fortifieds and all the rest. And so for one of our releases, the PX Sherry cask, it was actually one of the first casks to be coopered here on site at Waubs Harbour. We said to people, if you'd like a bag of these Waubs Harbour shavings, then we'll send you one. Just write into us. And Tom's there having a smoked brisket tonight, smoked with those shavings. That's pretty cool. So yeah, maybe that's a nice little offer for people. Anyone that's listening in. Feel free to write on in, and we'll send you a bag for free. Maybe I should preface that, cover the shipping or something in case we get orders coming from Antarctica or something. But
members go.
We'll send you a little bag of our whiskey barrel shavings. Yeah, we do. Rob's one of his things he's right into is smoking meats as well, and it's been really fun smoking meats here at the distillery and.
It's like that. Just going back to your question there before that, though, Seamus, with just the thing that we haven't really touched on. We didn't really touch on the cooperage until Tim just brought it up then. But from a production point of view, how important that is, and the link between a distiller and the cooper and the relationship there. Yep, that's got to be there. But you've got to be speaking the same language and looking at those barrels together over the fires is really important. The sensory component of coopering is a craft unto its own, and the actual technical build is a trade. It's a very impressive position, or like a cooper is a hard skill, and then to be able to be on tap, that's so good for us.
As you've said, so rarely possessed. I mean, the number of Scottish distilleries who still have a legit cooper on site, I mean, I could probably count them on two hands. So if you guys have access to that, I mean, it's got to have these huge benefits to your quality. Catching all those little variations on casks straight away. But you've probably answered this question, but I'm going to close this out with a fantastic question from Patrick Hefferon here. He's asked, what are the three biggest hurdles you guys have found in starting up your own distillery? And what are the three best things about owning your own distillery as well?
Good question. One of the key hurdles in starting a distillery is it is bloody expensive, of course. And you're competing with, at the end of the day, on a global scale, you're compared to and competing with distilleries that have been around for 200 years, and they've got, such amazingly deep heritage and pockets as well, and history and economies of scale. That's one of the big hard things, and when it comes to price point and that sort of thing, that is a pretty big hurdle because it's not, our tax system doesn't help us, but it's actually mostly the price point of Australian whiskey for craft quality distilleries is around the fact that it's we just have very low economies or inefficient economies of scale. So it just costs a lot to make whiskey for us and costs a lot to run a distillery. So that's a pretty big hurdle in itself. And we've got a pretty solid and sound foundation in quality. We need that quality of whiskey. I know it's a bit of a throwaway term, but at the end of the day, that's how we need to compete on a global scale with whiskey, and at our price point, because that's a price point that's forced on us. We don't just make it up and say, oh, let's just charge a lot because we can. It's a matter of we couldn't exist without charging this price point, because at the end of the day, after you paid everyone in between, that's how it is. So we're forced to. There's no option for us but to go after a really quality, high-end product, and that comes down to everything we do. The choice of barrel is a huge part of that. The never cutting corners with distillation techniques and all the rest. So that'd be I think that's pretty much the big hurdle in starting a whiskey distillery. And the other one, part of the question was, what's the coolest part? What's the fun part? And I think these sort of moments are really fun. I'm just looking at these comments from some of the awesome members here, from Ross and Patrick and Jason and Tim and Ross and Justin. And a couple of them have been asking a few questions, and Matt and Graham and Ian. They're just such these are the moments that actually really do make it fun, having a dram and everyone sitting back in their lounge room from wherever, probably around Australia, but we can talk whiskey and enjoy really what's been the combination of many years' work for us, and then even with the Whisky Club. This is something that we started talking about, Seamus, a couple of years ago. And all of a sudden, we're here, jump forward to tonight, right now, having a whiskey and everyone having a good yarn over it. So that sort of, in summary, is the real highlight of having a whiskey distillery. It just so happens it's a natural lubrication for us all that gets us excited and have good times. Yeah.
Tim, that is beautifully put, mate, and I think it gives us a really wonderful note to end on. So, look, on behalf of myself and all of the Whisky Club members, I want to raise a glass to the two of you for, one, starting an incredible distillery, and for two, making an incredible whiskey. So a massive cheers from all of us.
Yes.
And then for all the members watching along at home as well, I'd like to say on behalf of the Whisky Club and Tim and Rob, I'm sure you'll join me in this one, a massive cheers for watching along and supporting Australian distilleries and Tasmanian distilleries at that, because it's an important industry. It's a terrific industry, and it's making incredible liquid. So a massive cheers to all of you as well.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
And only other housekeeping I've got to do is we've got a competition winner. As always, you guys, you watch along, you comment along, you're absolutely incredible. So Peter, Walsh, Merriweather, the guys will be in touch with you. A massive congratulations for watching along tonight. You've got next month's Whiskey of the Month on the house. So a massive cheers to you. And for all our members watching along, we've got Glenmorangie with the legendary Dr. Bill Lumsden this time next week. So look forward to seeing you all there as well. But on behalf of me, on behalf of the Waubs boys, just want to say one last cheers and have a fantastic evening.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.